Hello everyone, welcome to Story Time at Soul Studio, and this is a story that we used during our Women's Circle at the end of June 2026, and it's a retelling of the myth of Medusa. There is an old story about a woman named Medusa. Most people know how the story ends, and most people know about the snakes. The stone gaze, the monster, the warning and the danger. But stories are curious things because sometimes they reveal the truth and sometimes they reveal what people fear. I've often wondered if the story of Medusa tells us more about how the world views difficult emotions than it does about the woman herself. So today I want to tell you a slightly different version. Not the story of a monster, but the story of a woman. You see, long before the snakes in the cave, long before the whispers and warnings spread across the land, Medusa was simply a young woman. She was bright, curious and joyful. She laughed easily, loved deeply and felt everything intensely. She was the sort of person who cried during songs and noticed beauty in small things. She felt sorrow when others were hurting and lived close to her emotions. And for a time, that felt like a gift. The world was full of colour and possibility, full of wonder. She moved through it with an open heart, trusting, believing and feeling. But life has a way of changing us. Sometimes it happens slowly and sometimes it happens all at once. And one day, something happened to Medusa. It was something that fractured the world she thought she knew. Different versions of the story tell it differently, but every version agrees on one thing, which is that a wound was born. It was a wound so deep that it changed the course of her life. And when she needed comfort, she found judgment. When she needed protection, she found blame. When she needed someone to listen, she found silence. The people around her looked at her pain and turned away, perhaps because they did not know what to do with it. Perhaps it made them uncomfortable, or perhaps acknowledging that it would require them to face truths that they didn't want to see. Whatever the reason, Medusa was left alone with what she felt. At first, she tried to carry it quietly, as many of us do. She smiled when she could, worked when she could, and carried on when she could. She told herself she was fine, that she would get through it. She told herself it wasn't that bad and not to be dramatic or angry or upset. She tried not to make anyone uncomfortable, and so she swallowed what she felt, again and again and again. Until eventually what lived inside her became too large to ignore. The old stories say that this was when the transformation began, that her beautiful hair became snakes and her appearance changed, that transformation had people recoiling from her, fearing her, avoiding her. But perhaps we might understand that differently, because I don't think the snakes were a punishment. I think that perhaps they were the emotions that she'd never been allowed to express. Imagine them. A snake of grief and another of rage, a snake of fear and a snake of shame, yet more snakes for loneliness, betrayal, sorrow, confusion and helplessness, each one carrying a voice, each one demanding attention, each one saying, "Please listen." But Medusa did not understand them because no one had ever taught her how, and so the voices grew louder, the grief coiled tighter, the anger hissed more fiercely, and the fear wrapped itself around everything. The loneliness became unbearable while the shame whispered endlessly. What had begun as feelings became something overwhelming, and it was impossible to ignore. It became something frightening. And so, like many people before her and many others after her, Medusa began to fear her own emotions. Eventually she left the world behind and withdrew completely. She retreated to a cave at the edge of the known world, a place far from villages and conversations, and far from the eyes of other people. There she lived alone. The stories say people feared her, that warriors avoided her, travellers took different roads, and parents warned their children about her, and everyone knew her name. Yet nobody knew her story. Nobody asked what happened to her, what hurts, or what is she carrying. They only saw what frightened them. And perhaps we do something similar in our modern world still. We see anger and pull away. We sense grief and try to fix it. We feel fear and tell ourselves to get over it. We experience jealousy and shame ourselves for feeling it, feel sadness and call it weakness. We judge the emotion before we understand it. We fear it before we listen to it. And so Medusa sat alone in her cave, listening to the endless chorus of voices containing her grief and fear and anger and shame and loneliness and heartbreak again and again, day after day, year after year. Until eventually something inside her shifted. It wasn't dramatic and it didn't happen all at once. It was a small change, a question, some curiosity, and then a pause. For the first time, instead of trying to silence the voices, she listened, really listened. And this time it wasn't to make them disappear, nor was it to control or conquer them. She just heard them. She listened to her grief, and she listened to her anger. She listened to her fear, and she listened to her loneliness. And as she listened, she began to notice something. It wasn't an answer or a solution, it was a feeling, a possibility, a question that she'd never considered before. What if these voices weren't trying to destroy her? What if they weren't curses or punishments? What if they were actually trying to tell her something? And for now, that is where we leave her. Not healed or transformed, not fixed, and definitely not rescued. Just sitting quietly in her cave, listening and wondering, curious about the voices she had spent so long fearing, curious about what they might have been trying to say all along. And that is where we begin today. Because every one of us carries emotions. Some are welcome and some are uncomfortable. Some we understand easily and others we spend years trying to avoid. But what if the emotions we fear most are not our enemies? What if they're trying to tell us something? What if, like Medusa sitting quietly in her cave, we begin not by fighting them, but by listening? And if we did, what might we hear?